Hello. Today we're going to focus a little bit on foundations for the standing poses, specifically the feet and the legs and into the hips. First, let's take a moment to get comfortable. Draw the flesh out from the sit bones, tilt the pelvis forward, root down through the sit bones, float up through the waist, through the sternum, through the collarbones, broaden through the shoulder girdle, release the shoulder blades, and then softening without losing your sense of expansiveness. Relax the face, especially the eyes, the space behind the eyeballs, the jaws, the lips, the tongue. Redirect your breathing down into the lower areas of the lungs, into the pelvic floor, the abdomen, and the kidneys. Allow the front of the chest to become passive. Slow the breath down slightly. Make sure your breathing is still comfortable. If you slow it down too much, it will start to cause a little resistance, a tightening, a tension in the mind first and then in the body. If that happens, speed the breath up just enough that you feel a sense of softening, of relaxing, of expansion of the mind and consciousness. And as you practice this, begin floating your head around lazily, slowly, leaning the head just enough to create sensations that are more delicate, more subtle than a stretch. And as you do that, see if you can almost hypnotize yourself. Imagine and feel the head getting heavier and heavier. The eyes, the tongue, the lips, the cheeks. Stretch the exhale slightly into a sigh. Two or three more breaths. And coming back to center. Take a breath or two, just sitting calmly, noticing how you feel. Now working into the shoulders, lift the shoulders up and draw the shoulders back. And then on the exhale, bring the shoulders forward. Up and back as you breathe in, down and forward as you breathe out. Reverse directions, back and up on the inhale, forward and down on the exhale. Back to center. Opening into a twist, take the right hand behind, cross the left hand over, lift, expand, and rotate. 2 or 3 breaths. One more breath. Coming back to center, switching sides. Emphasize lifting and expanding. And then breathing deeply into that. one more complete breath. Coming back to center. Circling with the rib cage, first one direction, and then the opposite. Rolling out the shoulders. Next, we'll work with Dandasana and extending your legs. If your hamstrings are tight, you can roll up your blanket and support under your knee so there's a little bit of a bend. If your hamstrings are fairly long, you can do this without any support. Reach the sit bones back, tilt the pelvis forward. Now we want to make sure the spine is straight, so if you reach back and run your finger up and down your spine, if you can feel the protrusions in your low back like a stegosaurus, then you might consider bending the knees a little bit and tilting the pelvis forward more strongly so that when you straighten up your back is straight, not rounding. Now with your feet hip width, try to internally rotate your feet until the outside edge from the little toe to the heel is vertical. And then try to spread your toes wide. Now we're going to pay particular attention to the feet and to the ankles and to the legs in this pose. The tendency is for the little toe to come forward and the big toe to drift back towards you. So the outside edge of your feet are further away from you than the inner edge. So reverse that by reaching through the inner heel and the ball of the big toe, and then pulling back on the outside of the ankle and the little toe. Now keep doing that and try to lift your kneecaps and tighten your quadriceps. And then, without losing any of that, push through the sit bones, lift through the chest, roll the shoulders back, draw the shoulder blades together and down, float the chest forward and up. Make your priority, though, the engagement in the feet, in the ankles, and in the quadriceps. 2 or 3 breaths. A little fatigue is a good thing. It means that you're actually working and over time will make progress. So rather than resenting or resisting, embrace the effort for one more breath. And then bounce your knees, roll the feet, loosen the hips. While we're here, seated forward bend, we'll do a half bound variation. Bring the right heel into your groin. Move the right foot to the right and swing the left leg in front of you so you're more closely lined up from the navel through the leg through the foot. Lift through the sternum and then just reaching out over the extended leg. If you feel this behind the knee, bend your knee enough that the sensation stays in the belly of the muscle, and if it's too easy, lean in further. Breathe deep. Stretch the exhale. Couple more breaths. Switch sides. Extend through the right leg. Bring the left heel in. Move the left foot to the left. Swing the leg in front of you. Lift. And rotating from the navel to line up with the right leg. Lift through the sternum and then reaching out over the leg. Looking for a stretch in the back of the right leg, a gentle stretch. Remember, you probably haven't really warmed up the hamstrings very much yet, so not overdoing it. 4 or 5 breaths here. Breathing deep. And then straighten both legs, bounce your knees and roll side to side. Windshield wipers. Now, if you take just a moment to watch. Okay. I'm going to turn sideways a little bit so you have a better view. Now, on the kneecap, we want to learn how to engage the quadriceps in a way that isn't a clenching. So I'm going to tighten the quadriceps a little bit. You'll notice the kneecap right now is loose. Tighten it a little bit and it springs back. Tighten it a little more and it gets stable. And then I can tighten the leg more until it's rigid and release. So practice that first with one leg and then with the other. Tighten one quadricep and then the other. If you need support, place your hands behind you while you're doing this. And see if you can tighten the muscle smoothly from 0 to 10 and release smoothly. At first it may not move at all. Just keep practicing. With a little practice you may get it to jerk. Keep practicing and over time you'll be able to control the engagement of the quadriceps. Switching sides occasionally. And then relaxing. Now this time we're going to pull up on the quadriceps and then as well as pulling up on the quadriceps we're going to externally rotate. So watch. I pull up on the kneecap, engage the quadriceps, and I externally rotate the thigh slightly. Not a lot, just a little bit. And then release, and then on the opposite leg. Lift the kneecap, engage the quadriceps, and then from the, not from the foot, but from the thigh, turn out. That's important. Relax, and again the first side. Lift the kneecap, tighten quadriceps, and then think from the thigh. Try to turn your thigh out. And then the second side. And bounce and roll. Now we're going to put that all together into a spiral. So I'm going to pull up and externally rotate the thigh. And then without losing that, I'm going to turn the foot in and the thigh out. And then I'm going to push through the ball of the big toe and pull the ball of the little toe towards me. And you'll see my leg becomes very active as I'm doing this, spiraling. So the lower ankle is rotating in, the upper thigh is rotating out, and then I'm reaching through the ball of the big toe. Switch sides. Pull up and out on the thigh, turn the foot in, turn the thigh out, reach the big toe, the ball of the big toe away, pull the little toe towards you, pull up and out on the thigh. And this is a spiral that we'll be working with in several standing poses. Take a moment though first to bounce, to release. Coming to your hands and knees, cat-cow. As you breathe in, lift the tailbone, drop the belly, open the chest, look up. As you breathe out, tuck the tailbone, round low back, mid back, upper back, tuck the chin. Couple more breaths. Back to neutral. Improvise, moving one hand off your mat, adding a little asymmetry, and then experimenting with rotating the palm in or out, or bending one elbow or both elbows. occasionally reposition your hands. Focus on trying to feel and move away from discomfort. Lean into pleasure. Take a few breaths to finish. A couple of symmetrical cat-cows. And back to neutral. Tuck the toes under. Walk your hands in close to the knees, and then lifting your knees, walking your hands into a standing forward bend. Either hands on the thighs, coming up a little bit, keeping the knees bent slightly. Or if you prefer, walk your hands down and hang into a deeper stretch. Breathe into this. 3 or 4 breaths. Bend one knee a little bit, stretch the opposite leg, switch sides. You always want to start with more subtle, gentle sensations. Give the muscles a chance to wake up, to relax and release, and then, and only then, begin to lean into a stretch. Come back to symmetry. Take a couple more breaths. And then roll up, stacking the vertebrae. Coming up to Tadasana. Take a moment to warm up with a little pandiculation. Start off kind of lazy. Float the arms out. And hear this kind of a yawning, stretching. Oh. Like a cat, a lazy cat that's waking up from a nap. And sometimes you'll see when a dog wakes up from a nap, some dogs like to shimmy or to shimmer. They kind of give a little shake. So keep pandiculating and occasionally add a little shimmy. And you're trying to, kind of like when you shake a jello and it wobbles, you're trying to send that kind of a wobbling energy through the fascia, through the connective tissue of the body. So now, raise your arms up and out a little bit, maybe bend the elbows slightly, and then stiffen. And now we're going to pandiculate, but with a stiff pandiculation. And then add a little dynamic bounce. Bouncing into resistance, but in a way that feels good. If you do this just right, it might trigger yawning. Coming back to center. Vinyasa Sun Salutation. From prayer. Sweep overhead. Breathe in. And then reaching your hips back a little bit. Just the right amount so that your back muscles stay relaxed as you're coming into your forward bend. Only come down as far as you're comfortable, and if your back or legs feel vulnerable, use your hands to support some of your weight. On an inhale, first bend the knees, start moving your hips under you, and as your hips come under you, lift upright, float the arms overhead, breathe in. On the exhale, reach the hips back, release, either coming back where you were or perhaps a little deeper into your forward bend. On the inhale, buckle the knees, slip the hips under you, float the arms overhead. On the exhale, reach the hips back, release into a forward bend. 5 or 10 more repetitions. Try not to rush the breath or the movement. Begin to work the overhead stretch a little more, taking the shoulder blades back, the chest forward and up. Couple more repetitions. One more time. Add a side stretch. As you stretch overhead, lift the left heel, flare the right ribs. Lift the right heel, flare the left ribs. Side to side. Come back to center. A little bit of a back bend. Lift the heart. Sink the shoulder blades. Supported forward bend. Hands on thighs. Either stay there or work your way deeper into a forward bend. Take a breath or two, and then roll back up to standing. We'll do chair pose to warm up, and then we'll take a closer look at our foundation and move into some standing poses. First, chair pose. Float the arms overhead. Now before you do anything else, lift the pelvic floor, pull the abdomen back, release the tailbone down, lift the chest up. And as you hold on to all of that in the core, take your inner armpits back. Holding on to all of that, bend the knees a little bit, tilt forward slightly until you feel like you're working the quadriceps. If the quadriceps are working really hard, straighten the legs a little. If they aren't working at all, sink into your lunge a little deeper. Reach the hips back and then take your shoulders back behind your ears, just enough that you feel your upper back working. If you're working the upper back too much, bring the elbows forward. And if you don't feel like you're working it enough, take them back. Now we want to work the quadriceps and the upper back in such a way that both get a nice workout. So if one is fatiguing, ease up there, and if one has not been challenged yet, work a little harder there. Take a breath or two or three. One more breath. On an inhale, straighten up, float the arms to your sides, forward bend. Start supported. Give your low back time to relax. If the back relaxes and it feels okay, work your way further. Three or four breaths. One more breath. Lean into the stretch if it feels good. And then coming back upright. Stand quietly for a moment. Coming to the front of your mat. So we'll be working with Trikonasana, triangle pose, and then some other poses, and we'll focus on one leg at a time, and then we'll come back to Tadasana and focus on both legs simultaneously. So take your right foot forward, your left foot back, as if you were going to do Trikonasana, but in a shallow pose. Don't go too deep. Now if you'll watch for just a moment where you can see, we're going to combine two energies that we've already practiced in Dandasana. One is engaging the quadriceps. Right now you'll see my kneecap is loose and the muscle is loose. So I'm going to lift the kneecap, tighten the quadriceps so this muscle becomes more activated, and I'm going to externally rotate the thigh. Now as I turn my thigh out, the ankle will roll out. So now I push through the ball of the big toe. And when I push down through the ball of the big toe and the front inner corner of the heel, the ankle rolls in, but the thigh turns in. So I go back and forth, pull up and out on the thigh, root through the inner edge of your foot, and then do both at the same time. If you're having trouble with this action, keep going back and forth, and then occasionally try to do both at the same time. Once you take each individual action into muscle memory, then you can combine them into a spiral. And then think of this not as two separate things, but as a spiral. And then a lengthening spiral. So as you spiral, lengthen the leg, reaching the hips away from the heel. And then bend the front knee, step up, and then step the right leg back. And then repeat on the left leg. Root through the inner edge, pull up and out on the thigh, go back and forth, and then try doing both at the same time, spiraling the left leg and holding on to that spiral. Couple breaths. Again, anytime you lose the spiral, go back to the individual components, take them into muscle memory, and then try to combine them into a spiral, and then a lengthening spiral. Expand through that spiral. Bend the left knee, step up, and take a breath or two. So this time we'll build the pose around that action. So turning the right foot out, turning the left foot in, nice wide stance for Trikonasana. Spiral the right leg. Again, if you're having trouble with the spiral, just go back and forth between those two opposite actions. And then reach the hips to the left, tilt the pelvis, and then lengthen through the lower rib cage and let your hand rest on the thigh or the shin or the floor. Broaden through the shoulder girdle, roll that left shoulder back. Left hand on the hip or float the left arm out. Find a comfortable position for the neck. If you can turn your head comfortably to look out past the left fingertips, that's fine. It's easy to create neck problems with this pose, so if the rotating of the head is bothering you, that's your body asking you not to do this. Until you can figure out how to do it more comfortably, just find a neutral position for the head. 3 or 4 breaths. Spiraling the right leg. Building the rest of the pose around that action. 1 more breath. And coming up, switching sides. turn the left foot out, turn the right foot in. Spiral the left leg, root through the inner edge, pull up and out on the thigh, do both at the same time. Reach your hips to the right, tilt the pelvis. Most people don't have a whole lot of consciousness of these muscle groups or control. So if you're new to this, your greatest problem is going to be trying too hard, getting frustrated, and quitting. So if you're already on the path to that, just ease up, don't try so hard. Breathe. And occasionally, without any effort, just give it a try. Root, pull up and out on the thigh, root through the inner edge of your foot, and then try to do both, but not as vigorously. Over time, your body will wake up, and this will become natural. Now, for those of you that are really engaging with that spiral, lengthen the leg and begin to build the rest of the pose around that, lengthening the lower rib cage, rolling the shoulders back, hand on hip, or float the right arm. If the mind wanders, though, come back to spiraling the left leg. And then trying to build the rest of the pose around that action. 4 or 5 more breaths. Couple more breaths. When you're finished, come up, turn both feet pigeon-toed, and either come down part way, or if it feels okay, you can reach for the floor. Take a few breaths, stretch the exhale into a sigh. Step your feet together, roll back up. So now we'll do triangle pose again. This time though, we'll focus on maintaining the front leg but adding the back leg. Step your feet wide, turn the right foot out 90 degrees. Lift the left heel, take it wider, set it down so the back foot is turned in slightly. Spread the toes on both feet. Shift your hips to the left. Tilt the pelvis, spiral the right leg. If you're still having problems with that, just keep practicing that and don't worry about the rest of the pose. If, however, that spiral is starting to feel natural and you can sustain it and shift your attention, then begin to spiral the left leg as well. Root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on your thigh. And as you do that, you'll feel your hips opening. The thighs begin to roll away from each other. The front of the groin opens. And do that in such a way that it feels safe, healthy. Root through the ball of the big toe as you pull up and out on the thigh. Otherwise, your back foot will roll out onto the outside edge. Take a breath or two. Switch sides when you're ready. Turn the left foot out, turn the right foot in, lift the right heel, take it wider, set it down. Spread the toes on both feet, shift your hips to the right. Spiral the left leg. Coming into the pose, right hand on hip or float the arm if you prefer. And then on the back leg, push down through the ball of the big toe and pull up and out on the thigh. Now spiral the left leg and at the same time spiral the right leg. Root through the balls of both big toes. And you should feel the groin opening. 4 or 5 breaths. Don't worry about the rest of the pose. Keep your focus on spiraling both legs. One more breath. Forward bend. Turn your feet pigeon-toed and release. Halfway or all the way. Two or three breaths. Step your feet together. Bend the knees. Roll back up to standing. So next we'll look at how to use this action to set up your legs for Virabhadrasana 2 and other poses that are built on that pose. So take a moment and just watch for a moment. So in Virabhadrasana 2 we bend the front knee. The problem here is that as we bend the knee, there'll be a tendency for the knee to drift inside the alignment. And we want the center of the kneecap to be pointing at the second toe, not inside the big toe. That causes problems in the cartilage in the knees, wears the meniscus unevenly. So this actually keeping the knee over the second toe. Now when we start to externally rotate the back thigh, that knee is going to drift in. So we have to be able to maintain this alignment. So watch, I'm going to straighten the leg. I'm going to spiral the leg. I root through the ball of the big toe and turn the thigh out. Now as I bend the knee slightly, I just keep doing the same thing I'm doing. Pulling up and out on the thigh, rooting through the big toe. And eventually I'll be able to bend the knee and I'm still spiraling the leg. I'm doing the exact same thing now as I was doing in triangle pose. Rooting through the ball of the big toe, front inner corner of the heel. Pulling up and out on the thigh. And then keeping that as I bend the knee. So let's give that a try. Come into a wide pose, wide stance, a little bit wider than triangle pose, not a lot, just a little. Turn the right foot out 90 degrees. Lift the left heel, take it wider, set it down. Now with the right leg straight, spiral the leg. Now bend the knee 1% and double down on the spiral. Push to the ball of the big toe, front inner corner, pull up and out on the thigh more strongly. Now bend the knee 5%. Keep spiraling the leg. 10%, 25, 50. As you're doing that, don't lean out over the right leg. Keep your shoulders directly above your hips until you are in Virabhadrasana 2. Now, if you're new to the pose, keeping your feet closer together, stop when the knee is above the heel. If that's too easy, walk your foot wider and then bring your knee over the heel again for a bigger, more intense workout. Now, holding on to that, try to spiral your left leg. Root through the inner edge of your foot, pull up and out on the thigh. As you do that, the right knee will drift in, so double down on the spiral on the right leg, and then just a little spiral on the left. If you do it just right, you'll feel your hip sockets waking up. And then make sure that as they wake up, that they're happy with you, not getting angry. Float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart, turn just your head. 5 or 6 more breaths. Focus a strong spiral on the right leg, a more subtle spiral on the left leg. Sinking your weight into the left hip. Couple more breaths. And come up. Rotate to the left. Turn the left foot out, lift the right heel, take it wider, set it down. Focus on the left leg, starting with a spiral. Once you've set up the spiral, bend the knee 1%, and then increase the spiral. Then bend the knee 5%, and then 25%, And as you start to come into the pose, square up your shoulders with your hips, back leg straight and strong as the left leg bends. If you're struggling, close up your stance. If you're not engaged as much as you would like, widen your stance. And then everybody should be identical in one respect, the knee over the heel, not behind or in front. Now, bring your awareness back to the spiral in the left leg. And without losing it, spiral the right leg lightly. Enough that the hip sockets, the thighs, externally rotate, the hip sockets open a little. Float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart, turn just your head. 5 or 10 breaths. Rooting on both feet through the ball of the big toe, through the front inner corner of the heel, pulling up and out on both thighs. Couple more breaths. One more breath. And then forward bend. Breathe deep, stretch the exhale. Two or three breaths. Step your feet together. Bend the knees as you roll up, slipping your hips under you. And take a moment just to notice how you feel. Now, the hardest class of poses to work with are the balance poses. First, let's take a moment just in Tadasana. Now, in Tadasana, we are spiraling both legs simultaneously. So, take your hips back slightly, walk your hands down, and come into a shallow forward bend. And then just focus on one leg, your left leg, root down through the ball of the big toe, front inner corner of the heel, and then lift the arch and pull up and out on the thigh, and root down through the inner corner of the heel and the ball of the big toe. Spiral the leg, and then do it delicately. Bend the knee, spread the toes on the right foot, root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on the thigh, spiral the right leg. Then keep that spiral, but ease up so it's a delicate spiral. Okay. Come back to center and come upright. Now, try to spiral both legs at the same time. Root down through the ball of the big toe, front inner corner of the heel, pull up and out on the thighs, balance at 2, let go of 90% of the effort, bend the knees 1%, so there's a little springiness in the legs, and a spiral action. Just 1%, maybe 5%, but no more than that. Very delicate spiral. Now, as you're doing that, that will cause the low back to tighten, the buttocks to tighten a little bit. So we have to counter that spiral in the legs by lifting the pelvic floor slightly, drawing the abdomen in, sinking the tailbone slightly. Try to spread the kidneys wide, hollow the navel, lift the chest. Bring the base of the throat back, lengthen the back of the neck. Broaden through the shoulder girdle. And that is the foundation for Tadasana. Now, at first, you probably won't be able to do all of those things at the same time, so you choose what you want to focus on any given day or at any given moment, and then focus on that more. And let today be the spiral. Root through the ball of the big toe, pull up and out on the thighs. Bend the knees 1%. And then all the other things do, but not at the expense of the spiral. The moment you feel yourself losing the spiral, let go of everything else and focus on spiraling the legs, and not with 100% effort, just 5%. And then with whatever you have left over, lift the pelvic floor, sink the tailbone, draw the abdomen in, lift the chest, shoulders back, broaden the shoulder girdle, bring the base of the neck back, lengthen through the back of the neck, float the chest, firm the abdomen, spiral the legs. Sink the tailbone, knees bent 1%. Take a breath or two. Now, when we are ready to start working with balance poses, most people balance on a collapsed ankle, and they get really good at balancing on that flat, collapsed ankle. When we engage the spiral in the leg, it changes everything, and at first balance becomes much more difficult. So if your primary goal is to never lose your balance and put your foot down, then you're never going to learn how to spiral the leg. You have to de-emphasize the importance of putting your foot down and make sure that you keep your emphasis on, at least for today's practice, on the integrity of the supporting leg. So to help with that, we'll use a wall, table, shelf, something that you can touch, a door sill, and steady yourself. Now step up so that you can touch it with your elbows bent and without having to lean forward. Now on the right foot, spread the toes wide, spiral the right leg with 5% effort, and then lift the right foot. Bring it either to the ankle or bring the heel up to the groin. And then with 10 fingertips, touch your support lightly, and then focus on spiraling the supporting leg. Root through the ball of the big toe, lift the arch, pull up and out on the thigh, root through the ball of the big toe. Sink the tailbone, firm the abdomen, flip the chest. But focus primarily on the spiral in the leg. Then use just 2 fingers, and if you start to wobble, use 3 or 4 fingers to steady yourself, and if you feel really steady, use 1 finger. And if that feels steady, you can try balancing without using your fingers, or even floating your arms overhead. 2 or 3 breaths. Keep working the spiral. Float the arms down, release the left foot, shake out the right leg, shift your weight to the left, spread the toes wide, spiral the left leg, bring the right heel up to the groin. If you struggle with that, you can put your foot on top of the left foot or at the ankle. Holding on and steadying yourself with both hands, set up your spiral in the left leg. Root through the ball of the big toe, front inner corner of your heel, lift the arch, pull up and out on the thigh. Sink the tailbone, firm the abdomen, lift the chest. Use less and less support with your hands until you're only using 2 fingers. And if you start to lose your spiral, use your hands more. If that's too easy, just use 1 finger. If that's too easy, you can float the arms out or up. Keep the spiral in the left leg as your primary focus. And then just do the best you can with the rest of the pose. Even if it means holding on to something to steady yourself. Take a breath or two or three. Draw the abdomen in, sink the tailbone, lift the chest, hollow the inner armpits. Float the arms down, release the leg, and then bend and straighten. Shake out the legs a little. And then a supported forward bend. Two or three breaths. And then coming back upright, letting the knees buckle, stacking the vertebrae. So do one more standing pose, and this time we'll have a choice of any of the poses that are based on Virabhadrasana 2. So you could do Virabhadrasana 2 again, or Exalted Warrior, or Extended Lateral Angle, hand, elbow on the thigh, or hand to the floor, or you could float up into Half Moon. Whichever one you prefer, or if there's a different pose, standing pose that you feel that you need for today's practice, just work with that on your own. I'll talk you through Virabhadrasana 2 again, but those of you familiar with the different pose, feel free to improvise. Spiral the right leg, maintaining the spiral as you bend the knee. Square up shoulders with hips. Straighten the back leg, strengthen the back leg, spiral the back leg slightly, spiral the right leg more strongly. Float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart, turn just your head. And remember, if you want to do any variation, that's fine. Whatever variation you're working on, focus on the quality of the legs. Rooting through the ball of the big toe, lifting the arches, externally rotating the thighs. 5 or 6 breaths. Couple more breaths. And switch sides. Turn the left foot out, right foot in. Spiral the left leg. Hold on to the spiral as you start to bend the knee. Square up shoulders and hips. Float the arms, sink the shoulders, open the heart. Strengthen that spiral in the left leg, and without losing it, spiral the right leg lightly until you feel the hips opening. And then any variation, transitioning into a favorite pose or variation as you feel the urge or need. 5 or 6 or 7 breaths. Couple more breaths. And then forward bend. Next we'll be working with the back row. Coming down to the floor. And if you have your own roller, you can use that. If not, any folded blanket can work well. Try to roll it tightly. The tighter the better. The larger you roll it, the more intense this exercise. All you have to do is unroll it, and if you unroll it enough, it'll be easy. So we want this to be relaxing, not challenging. So just big enough to make it interesting. Start with a roller in the upper back. Breathe deep. And then begin using your exhale to relax. If this is too easy or intense, adjust your roller. Every 5 or 10 breaths, lift your hips, and then with your legs push yourself across over the top of the roller a few inches and set your hips down. Go for 3 more minutes. Those of you that finish a little early can go back and start over. 2 more minutes. Five or 10 breaths. Take a couple more breaths. When you're finished, lift your hips. Pull the blanket out from under you. Set the kidneys on the floor before the hips touch. Hug your knees, rock side to side. Take a breath or 2 to let the low back release. Downward facing dog will be our last pose where we really emphasize this spiral. Roll to one side, come up to your hands and knees in table. Set your hand shoulder width or slightly wider, little fingers turned out, middle finger pointing straight ahead, and then spread all the fingers as wide as you can, including the thumb, until you feel stretching between the fingers. Now those of you that remember from previous workshops, see if you can spiral the arms. Root through the knuckle of the index finger, and then scoop the elbows back and in. In the upper arm, try to open the inner armpits, broaden through the upper back, and root through the knuckle of the index finger. Now, if you can hold on to that and spiral the legs, fantastic. If not, forget about the upper body and focus on the legs. Tuck your toes, Lift your knees, reach your hips back. Maybe walk your feet forward slightly. Now one leg at a time, bend the left knee. Reach the right heel towards the floor. If it touches, fine, but it doesn't have to. And then lift the arch, root through the ball of the big toe, lift the arch, and then from your quadricep, pull up and out on the thigh. Reach the heel down, the back of the heel, lift the arch, root through the ball of the big toe, lift and externally rotate the thigh. Bend the right knee, straighten the left leg, root through the heel and the ball of the big toe, lift the arch, externally rotate and lift the thigh. Go side to side. Basically the same thing we were practicing in the standing poses. Then see if you can do both legs at the same time. If that's difficult, go back to one at a time. And if it's easy, hold that action and integrate the upper body. 5 or 6 breaths. Cobra. Just one repetition of Cobra today. Any version, any variation is fine. Reach the chest forward, reach the legs back, lift the shoulders, draw the shoulder blades together and down the back as you slide the chest forward. Focus on the quality of the sensations you're creating and try and adjust so the feelings are healthy, pleasant, especially in the lower, mid, and upper back. Pressing the tops of the feet down. Take a breath or two. One final downward facing dog. We won't hold as long. Spiral the left leg, spiral the right leg, spiral both legs. Without losing that or compromising that, if you have any awareness left over, begin to add the upper body and the core. Keep your focus, your emphasis on the legs. 2 or 3 breaths. When you're ready, pigeon pose. Bring your right knee forward. Slide your left leg back. Drop to your elbows. We want an angle on this front foot, so we want your right heel to be out to the side a little bit or a lot, depending on how flexible you are. You don't want to feel any discomfort in the front knee, in the joint, or in the low back. So if this doesn't feel safe, adjust, reposition, or even get a head start with relaxing, rolling onto your back if you need to. 5 or 10 breaths. Stretch the exhale. Use your exhale to lean into the stretch if it feels healthy and pleasant. Couple more breaths. One more down dog. We won't hold for long though. Coming into the pose, spiral the right leg, spiral the left leg, spiral both legs. Draw your chest through, spiral the arms, hollow the abdomen, float the shoulder blades, open the inner armpits, take a breath or two. And this time leading with the left leg, coming through for pigeon. Adjust, looking for where you get no discomfort, and then adjusting to maximize any healthy, pleasant sensations. Stretch the exhale, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 more breaths. Take a breath or two. And coming onto your back for a spinal twist. Either bring both knees to your chest or just the right leg. And then in either case, you're going to roll to your left. Let your shoulders rotate. So you're rolling your whole body. And then with your left hand, hold the top knee. Draw it down towards the floor gently. Doesn't have to reach the ground. Just drawing it towards the floor. And then with the other arm, reach up and away, turning your head to the right. Notice if there's any kink, any pinching, anything that doesn't feel quite right, and give yourself permission to undulate, to adjust, reposition, come out a little bit, move the ribs around, the hips around, and then try it again. Don't stay in any position that is creating unhealthy sensations. On the other hand, if it feels good, then focus on breathing deeply and using a long exhale to relax more completely into the pose. 5 or 6 more breaths. When you're ready, switch sides. Come back to center. Bring both knees or just the left knee to your chest. Roll your whole body to the right. With your right hand, anchor. And with the left hand, turn into a twist. Letting your head turn to follow. Again, if anything doesn't feel right, come out of the pose a little bit, experiment, and then try again. 5 or 10 breaths. One more breath. When you're finished, hug your knees, rock side to side. And then getting ready for Shavasana. You can put your legs over a chair or put a bolster under the knees, or straighten the legs, or some people might need a little wedge under the hips or the back of the neck. So anything at all that you need. Use some minimal support in order to be absolutely comfortable. Shoulder blades draw together and down, the chest is open, the back of the neck is long. Breathing diaphragmatically. Feel the belly rise as you breathe in, fall as you breathe out. Relax the fingers, hands, arms, and shoulders, the feet, the toes, the ankles, the calves, the knees, the thighs. Take a deeper breath. Let the hips release. The pelvic floor, the belly, the kidneys, the ribs, the chest, the shoulders. The back of the neck, and soften the throat. And the jaws and the lips. And then most importantly, the tongue, the root of the tongue, the eyeballs, the space behind, beneath, and around the eyes.
naturally lazily. Yawning. And a lazy stretch. Expand your body, especially the arms, but keeping a heavy, lazy feeling as you expand. Moving the wrists and the elbows. Create sensations. Move those sensations through the body. And see if you can do that in just the right way that it triggers a yawn. Draw your knees to your chest, roll to one side. Pushing up to a comfortable seated position. I'd like to thank you for joining me, and for those of you that are new to these ideas like spirals and loops, they can be challenging at first, but keep in mind that although it requires a lot more effort up front, once you master these ideas like spiraling the feet, then you can use that action with hardly any effort for the rest of your life. So although there's a high price up front, the benefits last as long as you continue practicing yoga, and not just practicing yoga, but standing on your own 2 feet. So I highly recommend it to you. The main thing is, if you try too hard, you get frustrated. We don't like being frustrated, and so there is a impulse over time to quit if we can't get through that frustrating period. So the secret is, don't try so hard. Lower the bar. Be more playful and also more patient. And you'll find that if you just play with it a little bit, over time, it will, without as much effort, it will begin to wake up, become conscious, and eventually these actions are just natural. They just feel right, they feel organic. And then you get to benefit from it for as long as you continue practicing yoga or standing. I'd like to thank you for joining me for today's practice. I hope you have a wonderful day and week, and hope you can join us again next week for another yoga session. Bring your hands together over the heart. Namaste.